A long time ago, in the village of Wali, one evening, as the villagers celebrated the New Yam festival, Olisa and Yuju ran through the forest, only way to hide Yuju's secrets. Unfortunately, as they ran, Olisa tripped on a branch and fell. Instantly, Yuju halted and began to help Olisa get up. But he was deeply hurt. Yuju, you run. I do not want your father to catch you here, he said to her. But she refused. After all, it was her fault that they were running through the forest, instead of celebrating with the villagers. Soon, Yuju's father finally caught up with them. "You're a stupid child," he said to his daughter, as he picked up what Yuju and Olisa tried to hide. It was a bunch of colorful leaves held together by tiny strings. He carefully rolled it out and, behold, it was a lovely dress. "I knew it. Have I not told you to stop this nonsense?" he shouted at the top of his voice. Then, just as if he suddenly noticed Olisa's bleeding leg, he jumped in fear. My prince, he said, panicking. He lifted Prince Olisa on his back and began making his way to the palace. But as he went, he stepped on Yuju's dress, scattering the leaves with his feet. "Go home, lock yourself in your mother's room, and do not come out until I tell you to," Madu instructed his daughter. Olisa struggled on Madu's back, begging him not to allow Yuju to enter that room. But Madu did not care. Yuju began to cry too, while picking up the remains of her dress. In the past, she had shared her passion for dressmaking with her father, but he was always against it. "Our village is known for the greatest warriors and herbalists. I do not have a male child to become a warrior, so you must become a herbalist," he would say harshly to her every time. Several times, Madu would seize the Ankara fabrics Yuju used to sew. When she managed to make a dress, he would burn it. When he finally realized his daughter was not going to stop her craft, he banned her from buying fabrics and making dresses at home. This did not bother her, because she had Olisa, her best friend. Madu and the king were best friends, and their children shared the same friendship. Olisa supported Yuju so hard, with his whole heart. He was always fascinated by how well she could sew anything using a needle. He allowed her to hide her fabrics in his quarters, and every day she would visit him and sew her dresses while he watched in awe. One day, Yuju decided she wanted to try something besides fabrics, so she asked Olisa if they could go around looking for colorful leaves, because she wanted to make an elegant leaf dress. Madu wondered why she was always gathering leaves. Whenever he asked her, she would say, "Papa, I am just fascinated by the colors," but he knew something was not right. Regardless, he brushed it off. On the day of the New Yam festival, while he was leaving the king's chambers, he saw his daughter and Olisa carrying what seemed like a dress, with some of those leaves he had seen Yuju with. That was when he began pursuing them, to confirm his suspicion. As Yuju walked towards her house in tears, she knew she was in so much trouble. When she finally stood in front of her mother's room, her heart began pounding in fear. Was her father so angry that he would punish her? By sending her to her mother's room, she thought to herself. After a long wait outside, she bravely pushed the door open and immediately fell to the floor, weeping more profusely. It had been 2 months since her mother died, and nobody had gone into her room. Now she was forced to accept her harsh reality. Yuju shut the door behind her. Settling down on the floor, she cried until she slept off. Later that night, her father returned. and called her name through the window. He brought some food for her to eat, however, he refused to let her come out of the room. "You will stay there for 1 month. I am sure you will come to your senses soon," he said. Every day after that, the maid brought food for Yuju, but she barely touched it, because she was traumatized from being in the room alone. On the 5th day, in the evening, she got very hungry. Yuju stared at the different delicacies the maid had served her for the day, and she quickly stuffed it all into her stomach. Yuju thought about Olisa. He would be disappointed to see her this way when he came back. Days passed, and all her attempts to eat less were futile, and her time at Mama's learning center did not make it easy for her. A year finally passed, and the training was complete. Yuju was naturally excellent, so she excelled. However, she was just glad to leave Nonso and the others who poked at her because of her weight. Unfortunately, Yuju did not succeed in losing weight. Rather, she was way bigger than when she resumed at the learning center. On the evening of her graduation, Yuju waited for her father to come back, because she knew he was going to give her a gift for her excellent performance. But she was disappointed with what Madu had to say. "My daughter, I have found a wife for myself," Madu told his daughter. Yuju looked at him in shock, because her mother was barely 16 months in the grave. "Papa, please just wait a bit longer. What if she treats me badly?" she asked her father, with tears in her eyes. But it was too late, because Madu had already paid the woman's bride price. He was only waiting for the perfect time to tell his daughter, "Uju, you will love this woman, and she has a daughter. You will finally have a sibling. She was at Mama's learning center too. I'm sure you know her. Her name is Nonso," he said. As soon as Yuju heard Nonso's name, it was like shock went through her body. Every time she forgave her father for hurting her, he managed to do something worse than what he was forgiven for. She cried, but her father thought she was exaggerating, because the woman was not her biological mother. After his conversation with Yuju, things began to move pretty quickly. Nonso and her mother moved in, and nobody was as happy as Nonso. Nonso's new father was a very wealthy man. She could not wait to enjoy all the benefits from her father, who was the right hand to the king. Madu gave Nonso Yuju a slate mother's room, and this broke Yuju's heart the most. Although she initially hated going in there, the room had now become a place of solace for her. 2 years passed, and Nonso had managed to make Yuju lose all her confidence, especially because of her continuous weight gain. Her stepmother, Ama, tried her best to prevent Nonso from hurting Yuju, but Nonso refused to be cautioned by her mother. Yuju would hide in her room, eating or sewing her dresses, just to avoid Nonso's. Despite everything she had gone through, Yuju would think of Olisa, hoping that one day he would come back and ask her to be his bride. One morning, she heard her father shouting at the top of his voice. She did not want to come out of her room, but she was also curious to see what the problem was. "It is obvious you cannot pay me my money," Madu shouted. Yuju stood at the corner and saw her father in a meeting with an elderly couple and a young man who seemed quite familiar. The young man stood beside them, and she could not help but notice how attractive he was. But the next words her father spoke brought her back to reality. "It's either I lock your parents up in the king's dungeon, or you marry my daughter, Yuju," Madu said angrily. Yuju was shocked. She tried to run back to her room, but she mistakenly hit a pot of water, which got the attention of everyone. "Thank God you are here. I was going to send somebody to call you, Madhu said to Yuju. She slowly walked towards them, embarrassed. What was her father thinking? He wanted to exchange her for an unpaid debt. Her eyes caught the young man's eyes, and she quickly looked away. There was a brief silence, and finally, the young man spoke. Sir, as you may already know, I only returned yesterday. Please give me 6 months to pay my father's debt, and if I fail to do so, I will marry your daughter as you have requested. Yuju was embarrassed. She blamed her weight for the man's rejection. She did not know how much his parents owed. But who would give up an easy way out just to avoid being with her? When the young man and his family left, Madhu said to his daughter, "Get ready to be married in 6 months. There's no way he can repay me in such a short period of time." Yuju looked at her father and asked, "Papa, why would you make such a deal without informing me? Do I not deserve a say?" But Madhu believed he was doing his daughter a favor. Nobody has come for your hand in marriage, but your sister Nanso has had countless suitors. Or is there someone courting you secretly? He asked. Yuju did not know how to tell him. She was waiting for Olisa. So she said, "Please give me 2 years, and if I do not get married, I will go ahead with whatever you have planned for me." But Madhu insisted, "My daughter, this is about Olisa, right? What if he does not choose you? Or did he ask you to wait for him? If he did, his father would have mentioned it to me. Enough of this conversation. My decision is final. Get ready to be married in 6 months." Yuju cried herself to sleep. She made up her mind to visit the young man the next day, so they could find a way out of their problem, even if she had to borrow him some money. Yuju inquired from the maids about the family that came the previous day and where they lived, then set out to find him. But on her way out of the compound, she saw him walking towards her house. They exchanged pleasantries, and Yuju asked what he was doing at her house. "I love the dress you wore yesterday. It looked perfect on you. I came to ask you where you got it, so I can get something similar for my mother. I am sure it will put a smile on her face," he said to her. After hearing his compliments, Yuju felt the anger she had for him disappear. "You want to ask about my dress?" she asked shyly. "Well, if you must know, I made it myself," she said to him. The young man looked at her, very impressed, and introduced himself as Luca. Then he asked her what her name was. Even though he already knew, Yuju introduced herself, but could not shake the feeling that she had met him before. Afterwards, Luca asked her if she would like to take a walk with him, and she agreed because it was the perfect opportunity to talk about the dilemma they both faced. They walked for a long time, and Yuju learned about Luca and how he was sent off to war 6 years ago, where he got injured in battle. Luca was captured and sold to a man whom he began to work for. When news about Luca got to his parents, they thought he was dead. So his father became very ill, and in a bid to treat his illness, his wife borrowed a huge amount of money from Madhu, which they had not been able to pay off for years. "How did you escape your master?" Yuju asked curiously. "Escape? My master let me go. I did not have to escape," he said. Luca told her that his master was someone they called a negotiator in their village. Whenever there were important decisions to be made in the village, his master had to be present, even when people wanted to make business deals. They would pay his master to ensure they got the best out of the deal. You know what they say about the student and the master. I soon learned my master's trade. And when I was confident, I asked him how many deals I would have to close for me to regain my freedom. Let's just say I made a lot of money for my master before I left. Because he's a kind man, he let me go when I fulfilled my end of the bargain. Yuju was fascinated by Luca's stories, but she was also tired of pretending like she was not out of breath from the amount of walking they had done. So she slowed down and leaned on a tree to catch her breath. "I'm sorry, but I'm tired," she said to him, but he assured her there was nothing to be sorry about. Then he ran to fetch some water for her to drink. Yuju was pleased by how nice he was to her. Whenever she panted at home out of tiredness, Nonso made sure to insult her. Yuju finally asked him about what had been disturbing her all night. "Please, I need you to assure me that you would pay off the debt in 6 months as promised," she said to Luca. "Don't worry about it. I will pay it off," he responded, nodding his head. Although she had not known him for a long time, she felt she could believe him, especially because of his story. They both began to make their way back home, and just as they were reaching Yuju's house, she knew she wanted to see Yuka again, because their conversation was the best she had had in years. "I'll make your mother's dress, but you don't have to pay me. It's a gift," Yuju said to him. But Luca refused. He insisted he was going to pay her for her services. Before he left, he promised he was going to update her regularly on his progress, to put her heart at ease. Time passed, and Yuju and Luca found every opportunity to spend their free time together. Even when they had no reason to meet up, they would find an excuse to see each other. Yuju shared stories with Luca about her one true love, Olisa, and how she eagerly awaited his return. On the other hand, Luca fought hard to pay off his father's debts. He approached landowners who were ready to sell and negotiated deals with them. Afterwards, he found worthy buyers, and at the end of each deal, he would be rewarded with a certain percentage. He also worked for small businesses, negotiating contracts, and soon, news about how good he was spread among traders and landowners. Yuju cheered him whenever he closed a deal, and often they would celebrate with a meal by the riverside, where they would have long conversations, forgetting about life's problems. Luca also taught Yuju his negotiation tricks. Every time he would say to her, "It's not enough to make these fantastic dresses and keep them to yourself, you should sell them. And in no time, you would make a fortune." They would both go to neighboring villages and sell Yuju as dresses to interested buyers. Their friendship was wonderful, and if you had seen them from afar, you would think they were lovers. One day, Yuju said to Luca, "Olisa will be back in less than 2 years. I wish to lose weight, but I do not think I can do it." Luca looked at her and responded, "Well, I believe you can, if your mind is made up. But I really think you should lose weight for yourself, and not for anybody's sake." He told her that he was willing to support her in any way possible, and she gladly accepted his help. Yuju and Luca began to take long walks to exercise her body. As for her diet, whenever he could, he helped her cook fresh, highly nutritious meals, which they would eat together for dinner by the riverside as usual. Sometimes she would overeat and begin to cry, but Luca would comfort her. He never judged her, rather, he assured her that there would be better days. It was the 6th month, the time for Luca to pay his family's debt. He took his parents to Madu's house and made the payment. Madu was very disappointed and took his anger out on his daughter. Her stepsister also mocked her, saying, "I'm sure you were hoping he would fail to pay his parents' debt and marry you. Why would such a handsome man want you?" Uju began to feel that Luca really had no reason to talk to her anymore. Though it hurt her, she decided to keep away from him. Several times, Luca waited for her at their usual spot, but she never came. One day, he found an opportunity to ask a maid to call her, and out of respect for their friendship in the past, Uju came out to see him. He asked her why she had not been coming. "I did not want to seem like a burden to you anymore. You have paid the debt, perhaps you'd like to move on to other things," she said to him. Luca was very disappointed that she would say that to him. He thought they were friends. Then he revealed something shocking to her. "Uju, I had the complete money to pay your father by the third month, but I enjoyed your company so much that I held on to it, because I was scared you would stop talking to me." When the debt was paid, Uju's heart felt warm, but what she heard Luca say next warmed her heart more than she expected. "I want to marry you, Uju. I know your heart belongs to another, but I'd like to ask that you give me a chance to prove myself," Luca said. Uju blushed, never thinking Luca saw her that way. "You had a chance to marry me, but you chose to pay off the debt," she said shyly to him. "What kind of man would I be if I married you in that manner? I had to prove to myself that I am capable of taking care of you," he responded. Luca paused for a few seconds and then asked, "Do you not remember me?" Uju was puzzled by his question. "When I was younger, my mother would send me to your house to deliver firewood. One day I was very hungry, and you were eating just outside your house. I guess you were tired of me staring, but you asked me to eat with you that day," Luca said to her. Uju thought for a while. She had always thought he looked familiar. The first day she saw him, they had met each other over 15 years ago, and Luca had carried her act of kindness in his heart all those years, although he never saw her again. After their encounter, he thought about her once in a while. When his parents led him to Madu's house again, he had no doubt he would pay the debt. He just wanted to see Uju again. Uju stood there, confused, not knowing what to say, but Luca soon broke the silence. "I will give you time to think about it, but for now, let's take a walk. I promise to help you out, and I plan on keeping my word," Uju objected. She did not know how to feel. She kind of felt she was cheating on Olisa, but Luca assured her that he was not going to speak about his proposal. After the walk, they went their separate ways, but Uju had another surprise waiting for her in her compound. It was Nonso, sitting with her friend. They were both laughing at the top of their voices, but when they saw her, they began to cheer, "Our queen. Nobody else deserves to be queen but you." As she said those words, Nonso stood up and twirled around for her friend to admire her beauty. Uju did not care to understand what they were saying. Her mind was occupied with Luca's proposal. "Uju, are you not going to greet your queen? Or are you jealous that I will be marrying Olisa next month?" Nonso asked. At the mention of Olisa's name, Uju stopped to understand what Nonso was talking about. "Which Olisa are you marrying next month?" Uju asked her sister. Nonso laughed and responded, "I thought you were his best friend. Anyway, for your information, Olisa came back yesterday. He had to return quickly because the king is very sick and he may need to ascend. the throne earlier than expected. Yuju was crushed, but Nonso still had a lot to say. Well, he needs to get married before he becomes king, and Papa informed me that he and the king have chosen me to be Olisa's bride. Uju burned with anger. Why did her family always find ways to hurt her? But most of all, why had Olisa not come to look for her? She stormed into her room, refusing to cry. She was no longer going to cry for people who did not care about her. But later that evening, the maid told her that Olisa was outside waiting to see her. All the anger she felt for him immediately disappeared. She paced around her room in panic. What if he's disappointed with the way I look, she asked herself. Yes, Yuju had lost a bit of weight, but she was still very big. Suddenly, she heard another knock. Yuju, the prince is outside, he's still waiting, the maid called again. Yuju made up her mind to go and see him. What did it matter? He had already chosen Nonso to be his bride. As she walked down the passage leading to the front door, her heart beat in anticipation. Finally, she could see Olisa again, and when she finally set her eyes on him, his warm smile melted her heart. He screamed at the top of his voice. As he went to hug her, she broke down in tears. That moment felt unreal. It was everything she had imagined it to be. They looked at each other in happiness, and Olisa wiped her tears. Yuju could not help but admire him. He had always been handsome, but seeing him now, he was more handsome than she remembered. Warrior camp looks good on you, Yuju said, teasing him, and he laughed, exposing his perfect teeth. They both sat for a conversation, and Olisa began to apologize for leaving the way he did. I thought I would have a chance to tell you before I left, but my father sent me away. In the middle of the night, he did not want anyone to know the exact day I was leaving. To avoid attacks from his enemies, Olisa said. Yuju forgave him. They chatted for a long time, and to Yuju's amusement, he never mentioned her weight. Rather, he complimented her on how beautiful and grown she looked. But then he said to her, Yuju, I came to discuss something with you. As you may have already heard, my father is gravely ill, and I may have to become king soon. Yuju, his sadness returned, because she knew he wanted to talk about Nonso, but she was wrong. Yuju, I have to get married, and I know that. We have not seen each other for a long time, but I want to marry you, Olisa said, looking intently into Yuju's eyes. Yuju was surprised. This was different from what Nonso had told her. Mishi asked. You want to marry me? She asked again, but Olisa looked at her with a smile and said, who else would it be? Our hearts belong together. Yuju was confused. In less than 24 hours, she had gotten proposals from two men who meant a lot to her. Olisa could see she struggled to answer. He was disappointed because he did not expect such a reaction from her. Is there somebody else? He asked politely, but Yuju shook her head. She told herself she did not need time to think about it. This was the same Olisa that she had kept in her heart for years, hoping for the day she would reunite with him. No, there isn't anyone else. I'm just surprised, that's all. I will marry you, Olisa. Of course I will, Yuju said to him. Olisa rejoiced loudly. He told her how he hoped and prayed she would remain single all the time he was in camp. His celebration got the attention of Madu and the entire family, and they all came out to see. what the noise was about. Olisa gladly told them. No adjective could describe the look on Nonso's face. Yuju looked at her, hoping to feel satisfaction, but she felt empty. This moment was not what she hoped it would be. All she wanted to do was see Luca and go on a long walk with him. Nothing beat the moments they shared together. Preparations for the wedding began, as Olisa had to be prepared to be crowned king if necessary. Oftentimes he walked around the village square with his soon-to-be bride, and everyone envied them. The girls who had initially mocked Yuju now wanted to be friends with their future queen. Now, it was Nonso's turn to hide in her room. She had told everyone that she was going to be Olisa's bride. Luca, on the other hand, heard about the wedding. He tried to meet with Yuju several times, but she refused to see him. However, he did not fail to send her his usual highly nutritious delicacies through her maid, which Yuju ate. But deep down, she wanted to eat with him by the riverside. Yuju spent her days with Olisa to take her mind off Luca. Just like before, she spent her time sewing her dresses, while Olisa watched with keen eyes. As they chatted away, it was a week to the royal wedding, and Yuju was feeling suffocated. She could not help but feel she was making the wrong decision. One day she sat down deep in thought, when her father interrupted her. "Are you okay, my child?" he asked her, and Yuju nodded. They both sat in silence for a while, and Madhu spoke up again. "You are not happy, Yuju. You have always wanted this, but your mood has been sad. Since Olisa proposed to you," Yuju looked at her father, and tears rolled down her cheeks. "Papa, I do not want to marry him," she said. She did not even know where she found the courage to say that to her father, but she just had to speak to somebody. "My daughter, I have not been the best of fathers to you, but I know you to a large extent. Olisa is your friend and not your husband." Yuju's eyes widened at her father's revelation. Those words gave her the confidence to do what she knew she had to do. So that evening, Yuju set out to the palace to end her engagement with Olisa. As she stood in front of his chambers, she wanted to go back home in fear of breaking her friend's heart. But she had to do the right thing. Surprisingly, the guards were not in front of his chambers, so she assumed they escorted him somewhere. Yuju decided to sit inside and wait. She sat there silently waiting for Olisa to come back, but soon she heard something fall on the floor. She also heard Olisa shout slightly in annoyance. Yuju did not realize Olisa was at the other end of his chambers. She slowly began making her way to him. But when she saw Olisa, her mouth dropped in shock. The prince was wearing one of the dresses she sold, with a full face of makeup, striking poses at the mirror. "Olisa, what are you doing?" Yuju asked in shock. Olisa was afraid, so he quickly ran into a room to hide himself. "Would you please leave? I do not want to see anybody now," he said in fear. But Yuju refused. She wanted to know what her friend was doing. After several pleas, he came out, very embarrassed. "Olisa, what's happening?" Yuju asked, concerned. "Yuju, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I have tried my best to change. I have really tried," he said in tears. Olisa began to tell her how his father caught him many years ago wearing Yuju dresses and sent him to the warriors' camp because he thought it would make him more masculine. "Yuju, I like men. My father knows this. My mother knows this. And I have known it for a very long time," Yuju cried with her friend. She couldn't watch him be sad. They spoke about how he had struggled for a long time, and he apologized to her for trying to trick her into marrying him. Yuju told him the marriage was off because her heart belonged to somebody else. Olisa, do not worry. Your secret is safe with me. She left Olisa's chambers that evening. As she walked home, her mind was filled with so many thoughts. Everything made sense to her now. She remembered how Olisa was quick to ask her to sew her dresses at his place when Madu banned her from sewing. Then he would force her to make certain styles. It was obvious it was his choice of clothing, it was what he wanted to wear. She thought he just wanted to spend more time with her, but she was clearly wrong. She was so deep in her thoughts that she did not notice Luca standing close to the road that led to her house. Luca, she called out. As soon as Yuju set her eyes on him, she ran and hugged him, and Luca reciprocated. She told him that she had called off the engagement with Olisa, and if his offer was still on the table, she would marry him. Luca was over the moon with excitement. He showed her the delicacy he planned to deliver to her that day. My wife, I brought you chicken and some fresh vegetables, he said, laughing. Yuju held his hand, and they both walked to the riverside, where they enjoyed their meal together. Luca and Yuju eventually got married. They were the perfect pair. It took 4 years, but Yuju finally got to a healthy body size with the help of her husband, who supported her during her down and happy times, and of course with his nutritious healthy delicacies. He became very rich due to his negotiation skills, and Yuju finally had the freedom to focus on her dressmaking business, which she grew to be very successful. With Luca's negotiation skills and her exceptional talent, Yuju dresses were worn by women of different sizes in her village and in villages afar. As for Olisa's secret, Yuju never shared it with anyone, including her husband. Like she promised Olisa, his secret was indeed safe with her. Thank you for watching this story today. I hope you enjoyed it.